So welcome back, everyone. After the coffee break, we will now move into the next session, which is about documents. Another topic that we often talk about. And now my clicker doesn't work again. This is now. So, here we are. Oh. So we can stream this all over the world and we get everything to work, but the clicker doesn't work. That's really interesting. Okay, so another favorite topic, documents. No matter from what angle you look at it, document accessibility seems to be a tough nut to crack for many people. So the scale of the problem is just hard to grasp with, I don't know what comes after trillions, but we have a lot of PDF documents out there that most of them are not accessible. And I think, at least in my perspective, one of the issues are that many people who create documents are not, I mean, they're obviously not accessibility specialists, but they're also maybe not even very good at making Word or PDF or InDesign or whatever it is. So we have a lot of people who are not really professional in what they're doing things that affect accessibility in a very bad way. So we would like to know how we can help these people and make it easier. And we will hear from industry partners who are remediating accessible documents or making sure that the documents become accessible, and also from 3 of the really big organizations behind many of the documents that we see out there today. But we will start with a short video interview with the Dutch monitoring agency. And they seem to have solved at least part of the problem with a centralized service. It's just a prototype yet, so I shouldn't say they have served it, but that is an interesting idea and a kind of a way of trying to support public sector bodies. So could we please run the video? I believe it's Malcolm that needs to show the video. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. Could you please introduce yourself, because I do not dare to pronounce Dutch names, and let us know where you are working.
Yeah, well, it's also quite difficult to pronounce it in English, but I'll try. So my name is Jeroen Hulscher. I work for Logius, which is part of the Dutch Ministry of Interior and Kingdom Relations. We're one of the implementing bodies for that ministry.
Which means that you're also monitoring the Web Accessibility Directive.
Yeah. So we're the party that took control of that a couple of years ago.
You have something very, very exciting going on right now. And I'm thinking, how come that the monitoring agency decided to create a tool to support public sector bodies with PDF accessibility? Yeah. Because, I mean, it's the responsibility of the public sector bodies, and also there's a market for these kind of tools. So could you tell us a little bit about the background?
We found out that the PDF files are actually the main reason government bodies can't comply with all the accessibility requirements. Indeed, there are some tools in the market that can help you with making your PDF files better. Why not transfer all PDF files to HTML? And Adobe helps you to transfer large quantities of PDF and Microsoft Word files to HTML. We found out that government bodies are very happy with that.
Of course they are.
So yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So what can this tool do and what can it not do? I mean, does it just magically fix everything, or are there still things that the public sector bodies need to do themselves?
Yeah, we initially started with the idea that we can magically fix everything, and then we soon found out that that's more or less impossible. But we've also found out that we can do quite a lot. We found out that we should interpret PDF files in a visual way. So we use large language models to analyze the PDF files, OCR them, and then transfer it to HTML. And then some editing can or should be done based on the quality of the document itself. So there's an API you can use, and with the API you can send the files, get the response back, and then there's a very simple editor which you can use to finalize the documents and have the perfect HTML. In the background, we also make sure that it's compliant, and then you can download those files. So what it can't do is publish the document itself. At first, we thought we should make a publishing platform, but then we found out that government bodies tend to keep the files to themselves, publicize everything in their own area, and so now we took it back to the API, and that works actually perfect. Also, because your implementing partners can use that API to fix it in their own tools.
What would you say? Is it 80% of the workload you take off, or 90%?
I think eventually it's about 80% of the workload that's taken away. And at first we thought, as a team, that wasn't enough. But then when we did a lot of research and user tests, we soon found out that it's way more than the government bodies expected of us. So I think the problem is so big and so large for all these government bodies that any help is perfect.
Yeah, I'm sure. So this is now in a pilot stage, if I understood correctly. So when do you expect to launch when is the party when you launch this?
Well, it's partly every day, but because we're doing the right thing in the right way, I think. But we're able to launch early November, aiming for early November, and then do another sprint to finalize stuff.
And is this something that other member states can benefit from as well? Can they be inspired by it, or maybe even use?
Well, it's all open source, as is everything by the Dutch government. So we certainly hope that they will be able to use it, and they will use it. I think the tendency is that large language models might differ in different languages. So there might be some work to be done for other languages. But yeah, I think the basic idea and the architecture will work perfectly fine with all other language models.
But thank you very much for sharing this with us. I look forward to the party and the launch.
Well, we're happy to share. And well, thanks for having me.
Okay, so I guess the place to work is the monitoring agency in the Netherlands, because there's a party every day. I was not aware of that, but it's very nice to hear that they have tried, at least in a new kind of innovative way, to solve part of the document accessibility problems. So now let's meet the representatives of some of the largest corporations around the world who are kind of behind most of the world's documents, and including one of the courageous fighters for accessible documents here with me. So we have, I can see Christopher Patnoe, who is the head of EMEA and Accessibility and Disability Inclusion at Google, and also Rob Haverty, who is a senior product manager at Accessibility and Adobe. And we should have Hector Minto with us from Microsoft, but I don't see Hector. I don't know if...
We've been having some technical challenges with Zoom login.
Okay, so that sounds like an issue then. But we have Shilpi Kapoor with us, who is the CEO of 247, or is it 25/7? 24/7, 247. Oh, I say it wrong both ways, sorry. 247 accessible documents. Should know that by now. Who is also really active in IAAP and a dear friend since many years, and who is here all the way from India. So if you really want to ask somebody who knows everything about accessible documents, and also a lot of other interesting things on hiring people with disabilities in the large continent of India, you have the chance to ask her. So are we hoping to get Hector on board, or should we start? Can we get some kind of information somewhere?
Hello, Susanna. I'm working on it. I'd start with another panelist, and I'll let you know once Hector's joined.
Okay, So we will just go on then. So my first question to the panelists is, how come accessibility of documents still seems to be kind of left behind if you compare to the web, considering that so much important information is kind of hidden in documents? So I don't know, Christopher, maybe, do you want to comment on that?
Well, I think you're making an interesting statement that the web is that much better. According to the WebAIM survey, of course, 95% of the internet has a severe disability, has a severe flaw when it comes to accessibility. So I don't know if documents are really that much better, that much worse off compared to the rest of the web. So just as one key statement there, there's no one who's doing it particularly well. Two, based off the last conversation we had, PDF is such a challenging product. It's too difficult to parse correctly because they're image-based. So I think we just have much history of doing it wrong and doing it poorly, and no one has been pushing hard enough for us to make a change. I'm really excited to hear what we just heard about moving towards HTML. This is something I've been talking about with regards to EAA and some of the reporting, that we should move to HTML because it is so much more accessible.
So maybe my bad English, but I didn't mean that the web is so much better than documents. I feel that we just focus much more on web, and that there are more experts in web. And kind of when we speak to clients, they tend to start with the web, and then they go documents, and then maybe in 10 years they do internal things for their staff. So there is some kind of hierarchy here that I feel very strongly, and that doesn't have to do with the quality of documents, but rather the attention it gets. So sorry if I didn't say that in a good way. So Rob, from Adobe's point of view, what would you say, does people, how do I rephrase it in a good way? So do you think that the document accessibility get as much attention as it should then, if we put it that way?
I'll take that a little higher level. I'm not sure accessibility frequently gets as much attention as it should, regardless of what space you're talking about. But I think for document accessibility, the landscape is changing. Many companies are putting a greater emphasis on document accessibility, whether it be converting documents to HTML or in their native space. I know that, and it doesn't look like Hector's here, but I'll give a shout out to Microsoft. I know that Microsoft has recently released some work for converting a Word document to a PDF that makes it easier and more accurate. Adobe has done the same thing. We have upgraded our tool. There's Hector. We have upgraded our tool for converting from Word to PDF to leverage as much of the structural information that we can get out of Word. And we've been working really hard because of the European Accessibility Act on both PDF and EPUB output to make it easier for organizations to create accessible documents there. We have been partnering with the European Publishers Federation to address gaps in design in particular for converting to EPUB. And we've also done a lot with machine learning and AI in the document space. We have released an API that, much like the one we just heard about converting to HTML, this API will actually take a PDF document and tag it for accessibility, depending on the complexity of the document, anywhere from 50 to 90% accuracy. And so we feel like I think the industry as a whole is making strides forward in addressing document accessibility. I think one of the handicaps, if you'll pardon the pun, for documents, some document types like PDF, they were never originally created for accessibility. And so we're playing catch up. And many things that you could do in HTML today, you can't do in a PDF. And working with the PDF Association and trying to redesign how a PDF is structured, I think will make it a better experience moving forward.
Thank you, Rob. And I'm really grateful for you waking up in the middle of the night to do this. But I need to remember of please answer short part because otherwise we have many speakers in this panel. So Hector, good to see you. So here we have Hector Minto, the lead accessibility evangelist of Microsoft. And just before you entered the room, Rob said that Microsoft was doing good things. So you do not need to market your own work. But my question was more, how come that, at least my impression is that organizations and experts in industry and everyone is kind of focusing less on documents than on websites, and my impression is that documents still have bigger problems. And Christopher didn't agree with me on that, but what's your take? Kind of, there is some kind of hierarchy or difference. So how do you think that is still the case?
Yeah, sorry, I was a few minutes late, Susanna. Look, I think there is a difference, if I'm honest, and I think it's the sheer volume of the challenge and the legacy issues that are across all organizations. You know, if you just think of from a customer service perspective, imagine making all of those historic documents back on legal contracts that you had with your bank 20 years ago when you first opened your account, making that thing accessible. I think people are terrified of it, if I'm honest, and terrified to admit how much is not accessible that is available online. And so when we engage with our enterprise customers around the world, it's easier to have a conversation about the accessibility of the web than it is about the legacy within the organization. And I would actually compare it to things like the business applications in a business. Everyone says, yeah, come on, let's make Teams and Office and all these sorts of things accessible. But all of those business applications, well, that feels like a lot of legacy work that we haven't got budget for and that we can't go after. So I think you're probably right that it gets less focus. I think what's interesting, if we look at all the upcoming regulation, particularly in Europe, is this is all going to be in scope, and so we're going to have to really get onto like making documents accessible. Moving forward, there's so much more we can do, and I would say that the challenge that I think we're picking up the baton on is making the concept of an accessible document a visible concept to the author, and that's where I think we've made most headway in recent years. I don't want to go into a long rambling answer, Susanna, but essentially it's easier for people to see in our products where to make things accessible, how to make things accessible, and we're putting more visibility into flagging when things are not accessible. So before you export to PDF from Word, it says, hey, there are accessibility errors in this document. Go check them before you publish. Things like that, I think, is where we can actually make the most difference. Putting the topic in front of more people's eyeballs is something that I would say is something that we're going after.
Yeah, I would have hoped that one of you would say, well, in our next release, they will just be by default accessible. But maybe hoping too much.
If you'll allow me, Susanna, no. Here's what's interesting, and maybe this is where we can take the conversation later. But if you now make a document in Copilot, it will by default put headings and structure and everything into that document. So I think there is opportunity for us to start seeing the business flows of document creation driving more accessible documentation because of the use of automation. And I think that's a fascinating lens.
It is. And I'll get back to you when that works for real. So Shilpi, you're the one taking care of what all of these guys are kind of leaving out there that is not accessible, and your company is really doing a great job in making sure that that things become accessible. But it seems like we're working backwards. We're first creating inaccessible documents and then we're remediating them. So why are we in this situation? And is there something we can do?
Analogies out there.
I think you need to. Yes.
So a couple of analogies out there. One, as much as people focus on HTML, I can tell you that EPUB 3 failed, right? We all thought we would do ebooks and they would be in HTML and they would be perfect. And the whole thought did solve the problem, right? But we yet get textbooks in PDF. That's just the reality. The problem is not that the tools are not getting better. Whether it's Hector, whether it's Google, Microsoft, or Adobe, everybody is doing more to make their tools better. The problem is, what is the easiest way to get content out there without putting a web developer behind it to create those multiple large document pages in the design, look, and feel that you want to publish these documents to the rest of the world? Because remember, I think Rob mentioned it. It was about a print format, right? I can tell you, designers and content creators make the most visual documents. They honestly don't care about structure, right? I can tell you that design agencies are one of our largest customers today. They don't want to teach their people to make their documents accessible. They're saying, oh God, this is such a pain. Accessibility, we'll just send it to you. Get it done for us, right? They'll do the basics. They'll do color contrast. Beyond that, they won't do anything. They'll just throw it back. Now, the reality is everybody wants to push out lots of documents. And for every 100 pages on a website, I can tell you there are 10,000 documents on that website. Sadly, that's just the truth of it, right? So everybody doing why is it that I can make a document in PowerPoint fully accessible, right? But my customers can't. I'm teaching them the same skill. It's just that they don't want to do it, right? That's one. And especially you have to understand that I can make a simple document, like a press release, accessible out of the door. But if I'm going to make an annual report, or I'm going to make an environmental sustainability, goals report of mine, I'm going to make it as fancy for my users to be able to do it. So sadly, accessibility doesn't even come at, the point of thought. So my thing is, when I started my journey, I never thought I wanted to do documents. I thought it was the most dirtiest work that you do. It is, honestly. It's the crappiest work that the world sends you.
But now you have staff doing it for you, so.
And I do about 2 million pages a year, not even small, right? And some years I do more. Now, the catch is everybody just wants documents out of the door, and they don't care how fast they get them out. And nobody wants to put the effort. So somebody needs to take on that slack, and everybody doing everything about it doesn't matter, because yet the average person doesn't know a heading as a style in Microsoft Word. And that's just the problem of the issue. All of us accessibility people know it, but the average Joe on the road doesn't necessarily know it. And I think that's the problem. So the document problem is never going to go away, as far as I see. Automation is going to make it better. I can tell you the API that Adobe has created is improving the work. It's making it easier for us, for sure. What Microsoft's doing is making our world easier. But will it make it perfect to those documents out there? I don't see it. I thought I would be out of business by now, but I'm not.
Well, good for all the PDF document remediation businesses out there. Good luck, because you were, yeah, congratulations. You will have a lot of work to do for a long time coming. I just feel it's a little bit a shame for the end users. And we have been talking in different groups about maybe something that seems like a little bit like you can't say this, don't swear in church and so on. But is there a possibility that we could reach something that is kind of a good enough level of accessibility without, so that we get more documents to be acceptable in one way, even if they are not perfect? I know this is kind of contradictory to most of what we say and what we would like for end users and so on, but do you see anything in that direction? Is it possible to, yeah?
100%. I think templates, Microsoft's doing a brilliant job of coming out with accessible templates, right? Teach your people to use them, create templates for your organizations. So there's so much more to be done. But like you said, it's the non-entity in the room. The website, the mobile app is the fun thing. The document is not. So it's just that. I can tell you, I don't invest any additional money in making my documents accessible, but I charge customers to do it. So it's a problem of training, knowledge, and the wherewithal to be able to do it. And I think that's the gap. Every one of the tools, I can tell you, Adobe's auto tag API is fabulous, right? It will get you, like Rob said, to 50–60% of the way. Right. The balance is what you're taking care of. And sometimes you might decide to compromise that. But the challenge is, what are we really teaching the people who need to do this to actually do this? That's the problem.
And that's kind of an eternal teaching and training circus that I don't want to think about. So what about Christopher? Do you think how far could we push automation, or you, I mean, the large organizations? How much easier can you make it for people to make your Google Docs, your documents more accessible, even if they're not perfect? Do you see that kind of increasing in the future?
Yeah, I think good enough is an important step in the direction towards perfection. We should never wait for everything to be perfect, because nothing is ever going to be perfect. There's always going to be some need someplace that is, whether it's intentional or not, that isn't being met. So good enough is one part of it. Understanding what good enough is an interesting one, because there are so many ways for people to consume content and so many kinds of content that's out there. What kind of tools can be applied to pre-existing content? And here's where AI could be helpful. But then how can you do things like what Microsoft has talked about in terms of these templates to make it easier to do the right thing? Because if you make it easy, it's going to happen. If you enforce it, it has a better chance of happening as well. But once you start talking enforcement, then you need to have levels of quality. And that gets to be a very challenging conversation. How do you say this is legally good enough without having people just race to the bottom?
Yeah, that's true. But Hector, your AI thing coming in the future, is that also helping the complex documents that Shilpi was talking about, if it's a lot of design and things, or is it more the ordinary text-based documents that you can support the publishers with? You are muted. We see you, which is nice, but we do not hear you.
Once a webinar, I have to do that. Sorry. Look, the standard everyday tools are going to have more accessibility built into them by default. So as people change their behaviors and start to generate first drafts of documents using some of these AI tools, the bit that humans take forever to be taught, and you're absolutely right, Shilpi, no one, no matter what we do, uses headings and subheadings. But the AI is going to create those documents using those rules from the start, and then people will start working back from the structure. So you'll have to kind of then break the structure. But for now, Susanna, it's 100% on simpler documents. If you ask PowerPoint to generate an AI-generated deck using a subject matter, again, and respecting current brand values, again, it will stay accessible according to color contrast. It will add machine learning image descriptions built into it, and they're richer and better every year that we see these being used. But when it comes to bespoke, custom, complex documents, I think we're some way off that, to be blunt. But what I do love about it is that we're starting to model more accessibility to people. So if you look at the bottom of a Word document or any office document, you've got this accessibility investigate option there that's saying, at least it's saying to the user, no matter how complex this document is, this is not accessible anymore, and it's flagging it more. And I would say maybe that's been the journey in my 8 years at Microsoft, is there's more authoring tool confidence to kind of tap the user on the shoulder and say, this needs to be accessible. It's becoming more in your face than it might have been previously. And we're more confident to put that message out to people than we might have been in the past. But to answer your direct question, complexity will bring complexity. And so, I don't think the AI tools are anywhere near doing anything more than in first draft, creating relatively straightforward documents that are fully accessible. What might be interesting thinking forward is that how much AI will be built into the remediation tools. And so how can we use visual AI to start saying, that looks like a heading, that looks like a title, I can have a good go at remediating the accessibility of this document. That is where I think that they're not the authoring tools that we create to this today, but I think the future tools on remediation will start to leverage some of these same technologies.
Yeah, so you will make Shilpi's life easier at the same time as you take away some of the more boring things off her shoulders. So I think that's very nice of you to support her in that way.
Think of the journey we've been with automated alt text. I remember the criticism that came in, rightly so, at the time when automated alt text came in. But look at automated alt text today, and then I'm envisaging a time when you're going to be able to kind of dial up or dial down the amount of verbosity around automated alt text within these products. But we have to create demand for these things. As much as we make these investments in accessibility, what Shilpi was saying was interesting, is this, like, humans just don't care about this kind of stuff, is really what we're saying. The other role, I think, of the big tech organizations in terms of having this conversation is helping the industry to care about this topic and creating more focus on it, so that the rest of the ecosystem that surrounds document creation. Think of the ad agencies in the world, you know, creating adverts, creating documentation. We need to put it into their workflows in their industry, not just say it's Google, Adobe, Microsoft's tools. It's also kind of like getting the industry behind accessibility. And I think we're still on a journey there.
Yeah, well, we're just today trying to focus on public sector in Europe. That's enough.
Sure.
We don't need to add all the rest of the ecosystem. So, Rob, I wanted to ask you as well: is there ever? I mean, you're based in the US, so with the kind of good enough approach, is that something that makes you look for your lawyer, or would you be interested in having a discussion on making that's a nice smile on your face on kind of reaching this far with maybe the technical parts on PDFs, but leaving the rest to the manual remediation part?
I think there is a place for good enough, and it kind of depends on the goal of the document and the audience. And you know, an example would be a university student who gets a paper from their professor today and needs to read it by tomorrow, and it's not accessible. Does that need to be 100% and meet WCAG 2.2? No, it needs to be usable. And so I think there is a decision point that you make. You know, we recently did a project internally for our documents. Do they meet WCAG? No. Are they usable by our employees with disabilities so that they can understand the information? Yes. So I think, yeah. So I think there's a balancing point there. One of the things that we've been doing at Adobe, actually, in light of that, is focusing on the consumption of the document and not the authoring. Recognizing, as Shilpi said, that, you know, people don't make accessible documents. People don't know how to use styles in Word. So what do we do for the person who gets that inaccessible document? Well, let's use AI to at least give them a usable document. It may not be a perfect document, but it'll be usable.
Yes.
Christopher, can I piggyback on this? I think this is a really interesting thing, because even if we make good enough documents now, there's still the backlog of all the documents that have ever been created from the beginning of history to today. And all of them have not been made with, or most of them have not made with this kind of consideration in mind. So platforms, Chrome, Windows, Microsoft, Mac, the platforms are actually stepping up now to do a lot of this remediation, AI-based. Chrome OS can read and provide a decent AI-based description of a document for someone. Good enough is good enough. And over time, good enough will become better and better. As we have more experience, as the APIs make things more clear, the AI will have an easier job in terms of making these things more accessible.
Yeah, good point. So, Shilpi, do you want to add something? Yeah.
So I think the challenge is good enough is good enough. I agree. And it should be where we should start. But for somebody who's sitting with a lawsuit on the other side, good enough is not always good enough. Right. So I can tell you that I have customers who will say, I want a PDF UA, certificate with saying my document has been cleared. Right. So the question is now is legislation. So if we go on record and say it needs to comply with this, right? So customers are scared, right? So they don't know which side to choose. So either we loosen the standard on documents and we allow for imperfection. And if we do that, we will allow for space. But if we keep the standard at the same robust level, then customers are going to be at risk, is the way I would look at it. And that's how I see customers talking to us. So I think that balance between good enough legislation, technology, and all the new tech coming out there. So today, I find a lot of tech is not even created in InDesign. It's created on Canvas. Canvas is the tool for most people to create documents and brochures today, right? So I think we've got to shift the onus. Like we have authoring tools, and we have accessibility guidelines for them. We need those to go get into enforced, right? So we have to start looking at this problem very differently because the same old tools are not everybody is taking InDesign. Lots of people are saying, I'll just make my own document on the fly. So we need to look at this problem differently, but we'll have to balance legislation and requirements or if we want to go down the path of good enough is good enough.
So this is a very international panel, and most of us, I think in the room at least, and kind of most of the panelists today have been very EU focused. So I'm sorry for not maybe phrasing that or contextualizing my good enough idea, but really the discussion here is that what we see most of and what is monitored mostly is the technical part of document accessibility, and that can be very, very detailed and things that we from a kind of end user research focus think is very few end users with screen readers, that is in itself a very small group, would even kind of notice if you do this or if you don't. I mean, it's getting better, but it's really, really fringe. But what we see is many users who are not screen reader users, who have severe problems with the structure of the document from the readability perspective and how it looks and the fonts and the sizes and the contrasts and the colors and the complexity and all of these kind of softer things. That is not monitored in the same way. It's not really about the, I mean, it's not really the law, it's not really the standard, it's more how it's perceived or how testing and monitoring is being made, where I think the focus is very, very highly on the technical side, but I see many more problems and a broader group having problems on the kind of other side, content side, whatever, non-technical side. And that's where I think there needs to be some kind of shift. And I'm not thinking about anyone recommending anyone to do something that will result in a lawsuit in the US, but really to see how can we change the conceptual idea of what is accessibility in a document today in Europe.
I think it's very valid, very doable, but I think we have to come together in a harmonized way to make that happen. If that happens, we got this.
Yes, but I have everyone who decides about documents in front of me, so that's why I'm trying to raise the question. So my last question before we open up the floor for questions from the audience would be, so I know you're all doing things, all the tools are really making improvements and so on, but you all say that the creators of documents don't really either, they don't know about the issues or they don't find the tools. So how do we increase the findability? How do we make it easier for people to take the first steps and do at least the small things that everyone should do and could do to make PDFs, or not PDFs, sorry, documents accessible? Tend to be PDFs all the time, but really, what could we do? Rob, do you have a kind of how do we help the content creators, not only with the technical stuff? I know you're doing good things, but if people don't find it, how do we bridge this?
So there is a concept that's gaining some traction called Born Accessible. Actually, Microsoft is a good example of moving in that direction with Word, where you are prompted to address the accessibility issues in your document. And so, behind the concept of Born Accessible is exactly that, where as I'm authoring a document, the AI behind it would know, oh, you just created a large bold font. Did you mean that to be a heading? Let's make that a heading, or any of the other structural elements as you're throwing stuff on the page. And again, Shilpi's right, designers, they want things to look pretty. They don't want things to be accessible. And so as things are being done, if we can prompt the person beyond just saying make it accessible, but actually giving them the solution and saying, this looks like X. Is that what you meant it for it to be? Or did you want Y? And I think that will go a long way to getting this more front and center for people. And I was listening to a presentation yesterday by Jonathan Lazar at the Trace Center at the University of Maryland. And, one of the things he said was, this also needs to be on by default. So it's not an option to say, oh, I want to do accessibility. It's like accessibility is there now. Follow the guidance and just give good guidance.
Yeah, very good. That was a very good example. Thank you. Christopher, what do you think? How can Google and others help us all to become better humans?
Well, I don't think it's up to any company to make us better humans or to make or to force us to make the documents accessible. Awareness really is the issue, and this is true when it comes to documents or websites. There's not enough awareness of it being needed. So I wonder if we were to take a sort of a teach access perspective in which we sort of teach accessibility as part of design. So this is like pre-born accessible. This is like learn about accessibility before you make the documents, and we make it sort of a best practice that's taught as part of the educational system. And we're going to build all the tools anyway, and we're going to do the best things we can. But if you don't get people to be aware of it and thinking about it as like the same way security or privacy is, just having the tools, having the assistant tell you that it's not accessible or not, you'll ignore it if you're not taught to care. So maybe teaching people to care.
Teaching people to care, that seems more to the whole society than anyone else. But I'll turn to Shilpi and ask, what do you think? How can we help society, accessibility expert companies, big tech? How do we make sure that we support users?
So I agree with both of them. I'm going to take us back in time, or maybe to another level. Go and teach it at schools. Every PowerPoint that your child makes or that a school makes, and every presentation and homework assignment that they give out, teach them Word, Excel, PowerPoint right there and then. And if we can do that, we'll have success 10 years from now. And we won't be having this discussion, and I'll be happily out of business. So I'd say go there. So agree with both of them, but I'll take it back to school. So, you know, everybody has education programs for the education sector. They should plug it in there.
So that's good, and I will come visit you when you retire, because you're out of business. That sounds really nice. So Hector, you get to finalize this from your perspective. What do you think we can do without only promoting what Microsoft is doing?
Look, I'd love to be able to go to school and get every kid to care about this, and then for them to flow beautifully through the workplace. But actually, I think maybe the task here, as well as making the products nudge towards more accessibility more routinely, I think this is about making this a higher level of responsibility within organizations. This is a lot of the work that I've been trying to do. At the moment, accessibility teams are often invisible to their own CIOs, CTOs, chief marketing officers, chief brand officers. You know, rather than kind of say to every marketing person making a document that they've got to make their thing accessible, if you make it a policy within your organization and you get senior execs to own those policies more openly, then I think that's when we can start getting more buy-in for it. It needs to be, if you look at us as an organization, we're doing all the work in the product, but fundamentally we train every single employee on accessibility, and you learn that it's your responsibility to create an accessible document. And when it's flagged that your document is not accessible by whoever it is, please don't think all documents are accessible in Microsoft. Yeah, but at least when it is flagged as inaccessible, it's your responsibility, not somebody else's, not another department. It's this concept of a personal responsibility around accessibility. Then what we do is we democratize that. If we democratize the responsibility, then we democratize the skills. And we need more people to know how to do basic accessibility. And then generally, I hope that then leads to more of us as accessibility professionals doing the work that really matters, and not the mundane stuff that, frankly, you know, everybody can do if they're just shown how to do it. So more visibility in products. And I hate to say it, and please call me anyone who wants me to shout this to their leadership team, but more executive sponsorship for the topic of digital accessibility is a thing that we're discovering when we engage with businesses around the world.
Very true. Yes. And Shilpi wants to add something more.
Procurement, please ensure that all the creative agencies that you hire, ask them to ensure that the document they submit back to you is accessible.
We do, by the way. We do exactly that.
You know?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And so now we open up the floor for questions from the audience, and we have an online question that is a bit long, but it's for Microsoft. In a recent update, the images get an automatic alt text, which in my experience is not very accurate or good. Since in this case, the automatic alt text is already in place, you won't get any warnings about the images when you do an accessibility check. Is the automated alt text added to make the document good enough, quote unquote? It may help the creator of the document with the alt text, but the creator doesn't learn that you need to add alt text for images.
Not quite true. So let me just kind of say what actually happens. When you use automated alt text, within the automated alt text description, it says what quality of confidence or what level of confidence it has in the description that it's put in there. When you run the accessibility check, it won't come out as an error, but it will come out as a warning that that has accepted automated text, and it nudges you to check the automated text on the ones that are automated and not human input. The second thing is, when you put an image, and if this isn't working for you on your side, talk to your IT teams about deployment, because there are some sort of settings, I think. But if you put an image into a document, the generated alt text then appears on the image right in front of you, and you can read it. And that's also the nudge to the user that if it's not really describing what they think it should be, they have the option then to click on edit and edit it. So you are told whether it's good enough according to the machine learning kind of algorithm, whether they think it is in terms of its confidence, and it doesn't get you through the accessibility test. It still shows up as warnings.
Thank you. That was very clear. And I agree with you that it's a nudging thing here. We did a research project a couple of years ago where we did similar things in publishing or in authoring tools. And we really made sure that we did a lot of user testing with public sector body web authors. And when we showed them the alternative text, and that was in small languages like Swedish, so they were really crappy, and we thought this will never work and they will be appalled. But the other way around, they said, oh, I need to change this. If it was just empty, they just thought, I don't need to do this. But when it was a crappy alt text, they felt, now it's my responsibility because I put the picture in there or the image in there and I need to describe it in a better way. So I really think that AI can help until AI is good enough or whatever. I think AI can really be a good training tool. I agree. I really agree.
Isn't that lagom, Susanna?
Isn't that lagom? No, that's not lagom. That's we'll take that another time. We'll take that when we do Midsummer and Schnapps and all the other Swedish things. When you come visit next time. We have a question from the audience. Please state your name.
It's not. Yeah. Okay. Mathieu from Break the Ice. Thank you, first of all, for the speakers to be there. I just had a question. It's related really to document. For me, I thought it was like documents, but it's especially addressed to Google because document accessibility, when you see, in fact, we have a special case for the moment that's really like a primary needs. Of finding toilets, in fact, for people with disabilities. I thought it was about a little bit this subject. I know it's a bit out because now we're talking about PDF document, etc. But for me, in fact, it's you can do the approach in this way as well in documents. That there are some basic really needs that people need to have, especially to have the freedom to go anywhere. And I just wanted to see, because I know Google has done so much for those people, you know, to go on holidays, to go to the restaurant, to know where they can go. And wanted to see if there was the possibility, you know, to have like a special tag to find those handicapped or disabled toilets for the people to be able to quickly search and find a place where they can fulfill their basic needs. I know it's not related to the topic of those documents. I'm really sorry, but because it's really like a basic needs and it's not yet solved because everybody's coming with apps, things that nobody use. Google did so much. I'm just next to me, it's Marie-Hélène who spoke to me. She's in a wheelchair and it's always a struggle for her, in fact, to find a place.
Should we try to ask the question to Google? So Christopher, you are now responsible for everything in Google. I'm sorry about that, but that is now, I think it's search and Google Maps as well. So just solve this, please. It has to do with big toilets and how Google can help people find access.
So the short answer is we're adding these abilities to filter and identify these things in search within maps. So it's coming, and we've just begun in the past handful of months.
Perfect. That's a very positive thing. So we have a question here, Alejandro. So, yes.
I promise it's the last time I ask.
Oh, you're welcome.
It was mentioned at the beginning, EPUB So I was among those who were very hopeful that EPUB would replace many of the PDF documents that public sector bodies upload on their website. I believe most of them, except for annual reports and fancy reports like that, many of the documents could be replaced by EPUB format. But I wonder what's your views, and also the Christopher, Robert and Hector, why the EPUB format hasn't take off in Europe so much, I find.
So I would answer that by saying EPUB has taken off in the publishing world, not in the document world. But the problem with EPUB has become that though EPUB has all the accessibility requirements within EPUB 3, but nobody's really implementing it. It's the same as making a Word file which is inaccessible. The same thing's happening with EPUB more often than not. So I don't think EPUB has been understood as a document format. It's treated as an ebook format, and it's yet there within that industry. But again, it's inaccessible most of the time. So sadly, I don't think publishers took to it, right? So the concept of born accessible actually started with EPUB 3. It was the first standard that brought up the concept of born accessible per se. So I think we've just missed the bus on that, Alejandro. That's all I can see it. And I can see it with publishers.
So did Rob or any of the others want to comment on EPUB?
I have a few thoughts on this. I've thought about this in terms of what kind of documentation formats we were doing for EAA. And I think one of the challenges to what Shilpi was saying is that it's seen only as a book format, not a document format. So we don't have many native translators for say, browsers. If a browser were to be able to consume an EPUB 3 natively the same way it does with a plugin like Acrobat or HTML, I think it might have a better chance of being more widely adopted. But because it's seen only as a publishing format for books, that work hasn't been done.
Yeah, good point. And I don't know if Rob wanted, I can't see Rob right now, so I don't know if he wanted to respond or not. This is kind of an accessibility issue when I don't see people. Yeah.
I'll just
Jeroen.
kind of second what Shilpi had said. You know, I do think that it has been primarily the publishing industry, and because of that, the quantity of EPUBs available as compared to the quantity of any other content format is a lot less. And so there's a lot less attention paid to it. But I agree also with Christopher. I think that, if we support the reading of an EPUB more broadly, then it will become a more recognized format.
Susanna, it's Hector here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did start going down this route with Edge, but it felt to me like it just lost momentum. In terms of the demand for it lost momentum, and for us as organizations and businesses, we have to kind of follow. We don't just lead trends, but we follow trends. And if there was a kind of an absolute scream out for EPUB, across wider society, more globally, it could be put back on the table. Some of the work was started, but it did feel to me like it lost momentum.
And yes, we have a question here. Can we have the mic, please? And then I would like to go back to Alejandro to ask about what the end users think about it. But Bart,
yes. From monitoring body's perspective, a very interesting point about the good enough. I would like to get back to that one. It's an interesting point, and it's a problem we're confronted with as well, because we're asked, what do we need to do to improve our accessibility? And for documents, the good enough, when I'm thinking about the kind of documents governments publish, and I'm concerned about, we have procedures, legislation, and good enough at the very minimum would then need to be that the information is correctly conveyed, accurately conveyed. Because one of the worries with AI, we're all aware that large language models tend to sometimes fantasize stuff. And that is absolutely not something that can be acceptable for official procedures. Can you imagine getting a document about your tax procedure and following it, and turns out it invented stuff or it left stuff out. And that's where the good enough needs to maybe be defined depending on the context. And what it actually would mean would still need to be very clearly defined in those circumstances.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Hector?
Yeah, I'd love to comment on this. So this is something we tackle with a lot of our customers and organizations about where do you prioritize first? And so if you looked at like your tax information, your legal information with deadlines, with fines, you know, that would be a high priority for something to make absolutely 100% accessible and invest your budget and get Shilpi in to absolutely, you know, sort the game out for you. But there is information that is more flexible and that where with the bar of absolute legal compliance and requirement can be looser. And then what that brings into me, from my perspective, is what is the real lived experience of people with disabilities interacting with this information? So if you look at things like Be My Eyes, Be My AI on a Windows PC, accessing and describing a screen and creating an interactive conversation with what's displayed on screen, that is in the real life lived experience of people with disabilities right now. If you take a photo with Seeing AI of a document, it will structure that in front of you and let you read that document, but that doesn't remove your legal requirements as an organization, but it is an important tool within the kit of somebody with a disability in modern society, somebody with the requisite levels of digital confidence and capability. And that, I think, is where we should also be addressing this topic, is who tells people with disabilities about their toolkits, their get out of jail free cards, you know, their skills? Who's investing in the digital skills of people with disabilities in order to survive with a letter that comes through your physical mailbox? The messaging around the real life lived experience of people with disabilities, I think, is going to increasingly have to be delivered by governments, civil service, citizens advice bureaus, you know, government agencies will need to be informing people that there are still tools available from people, and then to request specific content if it needs to be, if it is inaccessible to them and they need it to be accessible. I think if I glimpse or, you know, take a look at my crystal ball to what's coming down the track, there's going to be a mix of what is legally required to be accessible, and then the second exam question of who tells people with disabilities in society what tools are available for them to make an experience accessible or to get the information from what's presented in front of them.
Yeah, that's kind of moving quite a bit away from the from what the Web Accessibility Directive requires, but I agree with you. When we touched upon it earlier, also it's also about assistive technology provision, and I mean there's a lot of thing in the whole ecosystem. We have a question in the back. Ibrahim is waving very beautifully, so even I can see him. It's a very.
I did not know how to do it good, but I just have a question for. Actually, I just wanted to say generally that for me the best use of a PDF is to sign a document, because as a blind, it's for me a good way to read the document and then to sign it electronically with my ID card. But the problem is that when you press on this button, which is accessible, you have to do something on your trackpad to prepare the zone where you're gonna sign and to put it where you would like to sign. And yeah, this is, I think it's a pity, because then it's the limit of the accessibility for the moment. I think in my point of view that it could be a place by default and a size by default, because sometimes I really try to sign anyway. I try to do it, and then my signature is in the middle of the text, and yeah, the zone is super small.
Okay, it started out positive, like if you really liked PDFs and then you ended up with a problem. So Rob, you have 1 minute to respond to that or reflect or whatever you want to do.
So if I understood correctly, then this is a document you're signing that doesn't have a signature space already identified on it.
Yeah.
And so so actually in our signing experience, we are giving you a keyboard shortcut to allow you to position the signature at either the bottom right corner or the top right corner as our initial workaround. And then we're going to start leveraging AI so that you actually, while you're going through the document, AI can tell you where you are, and you can say, yes, I want to put my signature there. So I think you're going to see some changes coming that are going to make this easier.
Thank you. That then we end on a positive note again. So thank you very much for that. And I would really like to thank especially Rob being up so early for us, and also Christopher and Hector. Very nice to have you here. I think Hector is in this right time zone at least. And Shilpi for coming all the way to meet us. That's a fantastic effort for all of you. And thank you for being here with us and sharing all your experience and knowledge. And I'm sure we will get back to document accessibility. And next time we meet, everything will be much better. That's fantastic. Thank you, everyone.